Hey folks, good morning. Hopefully you guys are doing well this beautiful day. It's a nice day today, cool breeze, very cool, great time to walk around, do some exercising outside. So I'm heading to one of my first errands before I go back home. So one of the things that came up is that there's a question came up for me personally, and just it started as a conversation with family. And what really is amazing is that we are always wondering as people what makes us provide a level of understanding of any subject matter we are talking about, from sports to whatever. And what really is very critical on this aspect is that we as people, we are very profound on certain things, from sports to financial to even politics. So what came up? Why am I talking about this today? So a lot of people who knows me, they know I do a lot of assessment, analysis, things like that. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years. I use the law, I use data, things like that. Somebody said something on TV a few weeks ago, and it made me think about when people provides a statement, and they try to invoke some point and reflection, and they state something, and they're fact checked. A lot of people are very defensive. Now, that makes you human, and I'm not going to provide any kind of defensive reasoning if that's correct or not. It's just part of who we are as people. But what made this conversation much surprising for me was that there was a statement from two different individuals. What really made this thing very funny is that these individuals have two different perspectives in politics, but they both agreed that a lot of data that's being spewed, doesn't matter if it's one side or another or this side or whatever, they all agree politics should never be the predominant or the most prominent part of your evidence in any argument. What both these individuals was pointing out was that when you start looking at the argument based on political affiliation, political feelings, but there's no driven data that's independent, that's peer-to-peer reviewed, and that hasn't been checked, you as individuals, as people, should be cautious. And one of the individuals said, what made me angry was that there was people in my sphere of political affiliation. They were crossing that line. If you don't believe that the data you have will give you 100% support of your opinion or statement or whatever, then don't hide it. State it. Provide the real point of reflection that's present in your argument. Don't embellish it to make it sound better, that your data is this or that. If it's not going to support your assessment, your statement, then don't use it. And if you do use it, be honest and say, hey, half this data is reflective of this, the rest is my opinion. They both argued, and not argued against each other. They argued that today, the social media, the clickbait aspect of the world, they're looking for a way to sensationalize the situation, to make it sound better or sound glamorous than it is. So people are using that as a focus on what kind of information they're putting out in their social media. It doesn't matter what subject matter it is. It's basically a clickbait. And they both agreed that people are so focused on what somebody else says that you have to laugh. One of the other person said he doesn't really care if a person is if a person don't believe him or her, but it's important for the person who's saying in open public that this thing doesn't work and they give you some information. That has to be 100%. And if you don't agree with it, then state it. Don't just embellish. Say, hey, this is blah blah blah. Joe whatever said it. Don't embellish that you like it or don't like it, and you give them a fake counter statement that doesn't exist. There's too many false narratives that creates this problem, sucking in all this individual insight and making it more problematic than it should be. So in the end, both individuals said it best. Today, people from both corners are willing to embellish information that they're talking about by lying. They're making it bigger than it is. And in some cases, they're not even real data. They're embellishing it by using presumption or assumption or sometimes make-up data. They make it up to sound like the information they're trying to point out is real. It reflects them and so on and so on. To have two individuals who are professionals say it best that they need to stop creating a false narrative because they want to point out their side without providing certain evidence that is reviewed, that's been verified, and just spill some negative tone doesn't help society. It just hurts society. It hurts the conversation, and it hurts real debate. Many of the debates we are doing today are more about social issues. How do we help this? How do we help that? More and more, I agree with them, is that more and more people are creating this negative tone. It creates a real problem that hinders progress. It doesn't matter if you're a liberal or a conservative. You should be frustrated and you should be angry when people use their platforms, their time in social media, their time in video, in radio or whatever, and put out negative tones or false tones to exemplify their side of the view. If you don't have the right supportive data, tell them the truth. That's an editorial. That's your opinion. That's not facts. And that's the thing both individuals were saying. One of the guys who said it, I might not agree with a lot of what he says, and he won't agree what I say, but we won't sit here and make us better looking because our views is more important to us. He said, we have known each other for how many years, whatever they were. We have integrity. Even when people in our social world want us to do this, we have never turned our back on integrity. You don't have to be an idiot to agree that accountability starts with being trustworthy. Being trustworthy means you got to trust the process. You got to believe in each other. But when one side lies and try to hinder progress by creating false narrative, both sides loses. Doesn't matter if you're liberal or conservative. That point from that individual was so true, because I see it too many times where people are using the narrative of their politics to provide a sincere development on their growth, on their policy, because they're trying to say, hey, my policy is better than his policy. That's not the point in their discussion. And that's the point I'm trying to say today, is that we have become so focus and the willingness to not do deep dive assessment, fact checking, because we don't want somebody who they know is right to succeed. If I've said this before, if my opinion, my editorial, my value, whatever state is wrong, I have openly said it in front of my family, my friends, everyone. That's the character of how I was raised. But I've been in situations where people have said to me, "Well, this is wrong," blah blah blah. I said, "Okay, cool. Provide me the evidence." I don't really care if you're conservative or liberal. What I consider important is, did you provide the facts? And there's a website I go to. It's one of my tools. I have about 200, 300 tools I use. And it's funny because when you read a subject matter, you have the perspective of the right and the left and the center. And I read all three sides. And many of the subjects that I do a lot of research on, I read all three sides. And what really is fascinating, and this is my perspective, and you can decide for yourself if it's yours. I agree from all the perspective, all the three sides, but you see the takeaway. You see how they talk about the process of why this rule or this law is wrong, blah blah, and I see the perspective from all three sides. But when you add it up, somebody benefits from that success or failures of that policy. Because as a person who writes policy, one of the things I always tell people, look at the perspective who gains what, who loses what. And there's the perspective I want people to understand. Just because somebody tells you that this side is better or that side is better or is not, find out why. Ask a lot of questions. That's the other thing that I realize a lot of people are not willing to do. They are not curious. They don't want to use the 5 W's. The what, the when, the why, the how, the who, the H, because people don't want to change their narrative, because if they find out that their narrative is wrong, they feel that they are wrong, and no one wants to admit they're wrong. Well, I do. My wife will always say that. That's a part of sincerity and humility of life. So what do you think? Do you think a lot of people today argue too much because they use narratives versus using real evidence to drive the discussion of any major subject matter today? So if you think I'm right, hit me. If you think I'm wrong, hit me. In the end, do me a favor. Do the best you can. Due diligence, and find out for yourself if the information you're trying to learn or hear or you have seen, is that true? This is not about liberals or conservatives. This is about being reflective and respectful for each side. Trust and honesty starts with being honest. What's your limitation? And if the information you have is right or wrong. It's not right or wrong. It's about if it's the truth. That's the end result. So for now, take care, stay safe, and have a nice day.